for decades, right? Or they might not have seen anything like this since they were children, especially if families didn't keep these sorts of things around. But as soon as they saw them, it triggered their memories of what they were used for, their purpose, why they were decorated a certain way. And like one scene in particular, there was a very elderly man and a very elderly woman, and there were these two little dolls, and they picked them up with their rubber gloves, and they, "Oh, hi, husband. How are you? Did you go hunting today? Oh, I'm good. Okay, do you want to go to bed? Okay, bye." You know, it was just the cutest thing ever. And they were toys. They probably remembered playing with something like that. And so they were able to add information to those collections and really enrich those collections. And after they went and saw these different collections and after they recorded it all, they went to an Inuit university, Nunavut Sivuniksavut, that are all Inuit students that are in between the ages of like 18 and 25. And they showed them some of these things that they were able to find. And those elders told those kids, "You come from a place of strength. Everything that was made just perfectly so that they could be comfortable and that they could adapt to the world around them. You should be proud of where you come from." And they were in tears telling these stories. And I mean, very powerful production. It's called Things Inuit Own. It's got like a Inuktitut name, but the translation is Things Inuit Own. So I would highly recommend for anybody to watch that if you're interested in that sort of thing.
Wow. And okay, so generally speaking, with our presence in museums, what do you think is reflected on what our Native narrative is?
They're saying that we're from a long time ago and we're not from right now and right here and into the future. I think a lot of museums, when it comes to Native representation, they're showing our old regalia that hardly any Native today would really own for themselves or know how to even create themselves. And they're putting us in the past, I guess, is what I generally say of what they're saying about us.
I think that they're confusing the tradition and contemporary. You know, they're confusing these ideas as being like tradition is past. You know, tradition is the real stuff. And contemporary, whatever it is we're doing today, isn't traditional. But it's actually our power and our privilege to say that whatever it is that I do in this moment is traditional, is contemporary, is indigenous, and that's where us can exist. You know, and I think that we need to stop with that separation. And, you know, projects like this should have some sort of memory. You know, it's like, this is in a way is like ephemera, you know, but we need to make it a lasting sort of presence, you know, because it is just as worthy and in many cases better.
I think it really depends on the institution. What I think the right thing to do is to be constantly reevaluating what you're putting out, what your exhibits are, what story you're telling. I mean, otherwise, you know, you put something out, you create an exhibit, and it's stagnant and it's there, and somebody goes and visits the museum once and they're like, "Oh, why do I need to go back? I already been there. I already seen what they had," you know? So I think it's really important to keep it fresh and continue to work with the Native community which you are representing by the exhibits. I have a story about the New Bedford Whaling Museum. They have a small exhibit about subsistence whaling, Inuit whaling, and they had called us up to make sure that the information they were putting out it looks good, it's appropriate, and we said, yeah, this is good. And they said, "Oh yeah, by the way, we need a shoulder gun for our exhibits. Do you know anyone that's willing to sell those? And I'm like, well, I think most shoulder guns are in use. So good luck with that, So I think it really depends on the institution. If the institution is a good institution, they'll work with the community. And even Native-owned institutions should continue to reevaluate their exhibits to make sure they keep it fresh.
Great. Do any of you guys have any questions or anything that you'd like to add? Anybody? Oh, Ronnie?
Oh, no, I forgot. Just kidding. So just a little background for me is I am half Inupiaq, but I grew up in Idaho. And I came back here thinking of, who am I? What is my identity? And that's where I get it, is the museum. So when I see the stuff at the museum, I'm thinking, this is what I should be. It's not who I am, though. It's where my ancestors are. So this right here just helps me remember that I'm still Inupiaq too. So thanks.
You can make us cry. Wow, that's really nice.
Alice, if I could say a few words. Thank you for saying that. That's powerful. Thank you for being brave enough to share that. And I think it's not just one incident. There's many people all across our state, especially those that may have been transplanted or gotten into the foster system or moved away or what have you, or even people in our own state where, let's take Kodiak, for example, where the Russians and the Americans did everything that they could to wipe them of their heritage and their pride to control them, essentially. That's horrible. And so now, how does the historic institution tell that story? That's not an easy story to tell. And there's a man by the name of Sven Hawkinson Jr. that worked at the Alutiiq Museum. He actually was the director of I think it was the executive director of the Alutiiq Museum for many years, and he worked very hard to help tell the story of his people, including all of the bad stuff, right? But telling it a story of triumph, that they're still here, that they should be proud that they've survived all of this. And what he had done was he also had used archaeological objects to help tell that story. And so, our story as Native people is really like a success story, and we're continuing to still build upon it. There's something called the Inuit power curve, where we may, before contact, we live this perfect life, as some people like to recall, in the good old days, right? No, but everything was good, they say, right? And then they started losing rights, and people were dying and getting sick, and you're going down here. And then now we're at a place with self-determination that we are making more and more decisions that affect us positively. We're taking control back. And that story needs to be shared. And we need to share these stories of successes and the beautiful things of our culture, and continue to document our heritage and our history, so that if anybody wants to know more, like say Ronnie or anyone else, that it's there for them, and that it makes sense.
I also want to thank you for sharing that part of you. I think that's a really special and vulnerable space to be swimming through. And I think that shows a lot of why a museum or even media is really important right now when it comes to Native identity. I don't think that museums or big media in general should have that power over an Inuit woman or a Native woman to make them question themselves. Those systems should not have the power for us to feel vulnerable as Native people. We should be empowered when we come into there, because that's what the purpose is supposed to be. But unfortunately, I think really it's a systemic problem where it was put into place to give the other people power. And I think through media and through social media, I think that Natives are on a rise. They're in the power curve right now through what's possible through even just a podcast or the Kadigizine or just somebody's Instagram platform or their Twitter following. I think it's a really powerful time and space right now because we're shifting and we're creating that community, and we're showing that we can just be like a funny Native girl saying some shit sometimes, like, or I didn't mean to swear, but I had to let that out. I think it's like you, like, no question, like without a doubt, are an Inuit woman, regardless of what your history is. And I think that's where a museum should step in, because that's a systemic thing, and they should be developing. We have created a community online already as Native people across the globe, like internationally, across everywhere. But I think it's time for like a systemic space, like a museum, to be able to provide for that community, because we exist and we're here. But right now we're mostly here on the interwebs. And I think it's amazing that we're here right now. And I'm so thankful that you guys are here. And I'm so glad that you shared that part of you.
I think we have just a couple more one minute left. Oh, one more question. Okay. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add or any questions? Will?
What would you like to see in the future, ideally, of this indigenized media? What do you think is lacking, and where do you see it going, either in the museum or media?
I think that museums, media, institutions are, in this day and age, all about buzzwords. You know, you have decolonization, inclusion, equity. And I think that there needs to be some action connected to that. And when I say action, I mean that you can't do it without Native people. You're not allowed to decolonize, to be equitable, to be inclusive without us. And that means that we need to have so many podcasts and so many TV shows and so many exhibits where we're leading that content, you know, that we're creating it and being able to represent ourselves in those things. You know, I don't want to hear about somebody talking about all these things that they're doing unless they're including us in those decisions and from the very beginning.
What I would like to see, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15, 20, I want to see more Indigenous people in the media. And I mean, can you imagine how cool it would be is if we had media outlets for each Native group in our state of Alaska? And then how cool would it be if it was in our language, you know? I think that the more art, culture, media, any sort, media of all platforms, the more that's created of our Indigenous people, the better that we're doing, you know. But I do really believe that we need to be in a place economically that we can do those things. You know, if you're struggling to feed yourself, clothe yourself, find shelter, all of those sorts of things, there's no time to create and to discuss and to ponder all of the beautiful and bad things of this world. So what I would hope is that our state continues to thrive economically and that our media just proliferates.
Wow. Really great, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate having this conversation with you three and all of you who are here with me, mostly my family. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Aka. my sisters, for being here. And thank you all for listening to Coffee and Kwak. Yeah. Koyanakbak. Thank you guys for coming.